I think we can get started. We will start with a roll call.
Paula Hyatt.
Here.
Linda Peterson Adams.
Here.
Mike Gardner.
Here.
Eric Navickas.
Here.
Jeff Dahl.
Here.
David Runkle.
Yeah.
Dylan Bloom.
Here.
Shane Hunter.
Here.
Gina Duquesne.
Here.
Lita Shapiro.
Here.
Eric Hansen.
Here.
Bob Kaplan.
Here.
Absent Tanya Graham.
Here.
Absent is Andy Card.
Thank you. Okay. I don't. Oh. Perfect. Got everybody. Didn't print out a copy of the agenda, unfortunately. Sorry, everybody. I'm just assuming we're going straight into.
Yes.
Andy Card is here for the record.
So we didn't have any public testimony emailed, and there's no one here, so we're good there, I think.
Perfect.
You want me to dive into administration?
Yes,
All
please.
right, let's do it. So we're going to go over the administration budget today. Just at a high level overview, when we're talking about administration, we're going to cover the city manager's office, the legal department, mayor and council, human resources, the municipal court, and the recorder. So we'll start with the city manager's office. As you all are aware, the city manager's office provides general oversight and management of the.
Can you stop for a second? It's not on the screen up here.
That's okay, it's not going to be.
Oh,
It will only be on these.
okay.
So the city manager's office works with city council on their policies, as well as departments to implement community priorities and policy objectives. The city manager's office provides management and administrative oversight for economic development, as well as the conservation division. Although, to be transparent, we haven't done much with conservation. Tom has taken that thus far, so we're hopeful this biennium we'll be able to deep dive into that. In addition, the city manager's office prepares recommendations and implements the policy direction as approved by council. City manager's office, our priorities for the next biennium. We're hopeful to update the city's website and expand our communications with the community. We want to update the administrative policies that haven't been reviewed in a while, implement a better agenda management system, support council's vision, values, and priorities, support the university district, coordinate branding efforts with community partners, have permanent plans and locations for our emergency weather shelter, expand the EOC and emergency training capabilities, and of course, support our departments. City manager's office is made up of a management analyst, communications officer, myself, and our EOC officer. Significant changes in the city manager's budget. We have the addition of the 1 FTE of the communications officer, adding 1 FTE of the emergency management coordinator, increased our management analyst position to 1 FTE from 0.5. We've also moved the emergency management funds from the fire department to follow our emergency management coordinator to the city manager's budget. And as a high level, here is our budget. So I was going to ask questions for the whole admin at the end, but if we'd like to pause here for any city manager department questions. Okay.
Doesn't seem they're all right.
All right, rolling on. Legal. Our legal division represents the city in all legal proceedings and provides legal advice to city staff, elected officials, and our boards and commissions, as well as serves as prosecuting attorney in criminal and certain infraction or violation proceedings in municipal court. They also occasionally contract with outside attorneys for needs, specialty legal services, and I think that's pretty much it. They do a whole bunch of other stuff. Big fans, keep us out of trouble, right?
What page is this on in the budget?
Legal 140.
So legal's priorities are to continue to give timely, accurate, precise, and uniform legal advice, compliance with legal requirements, identification of legal consequences of prospective decisions made in advance, support counsel and their vision and values, have early consideration to alternative resolutions for legal disputes, efficient and equitable prosecutions of code violations and misdemeanors, public contracting procedures observed, support and advise counsel, support the departments, And then continue to update ordinances, revise procurement policies, public records, establishment of clear legal process for citizens. This is our legal department. We have the city attorney, the assistant city attorney, and one administrative analyst. And their overall proposed budget of personnel services and materials and services. They had no significant changes. Any questions?
I have a question. I just wanted to, you mentioned the efficient processing of all the legal stuff that we have to do. Are we doing okay with that? Do we, with the number of people that we have in the department, are we okay? Are we falling behind?
We're definitely in a better place than when we had no attorneys.
Sure.
So I feel like we're trending upward. So we have our full-time assistant city attorney who came on board and has been a great asset. We're currently in the process of hiring for a permanent city attorney, but we've had Doug McGarry helping us out in the interim, and we have an outstanding administrative analyst. So I think we are trending upward with that.
Okay. Cool.
Any other? Okay. All right. Mayor and council. Elected by the citizens of Ashland for a council manager form of government. They are responsible for setting policy, adopting ordinances, establishing citywide goals and objectives, and providing a link to city government for citizens and business. Council priorities: training and professional development, compliance with legal requirements, support the sister cities, support for vision, values, and priorities, annual end-of-year recognition for staff and city committee volunteers, strong representation in liaison roles, engagement through processes such as town halls, support tax-based expansion, consideration on affordability and early childhood learning options, and support for economic development initiatives in cooperation with community partners. Significant changes: there was an elimination of the healthcare benefits, and then addition of more training and travel dollars for mayor and council into the next biennium. And here is their proposed budget. Any questions on?
Does this include the, if the ballot measure passes?
Nope, so this is built as is. If the ballot measure passes, we'll have to amend this budget.
Okay.
All right. All right. Moving on to HR, which I can bring up our interim HR director, Molly Taylor. So y'all can ask the hard-hitting questions. So Human Resources Department provides guidance and support to all city departments, including all aspects of recruitment and staffing, employee onboarding and offboarding, records management, classification and compensation, policy development, performance management, and employee and labor relations to provide quality service to our community. So several large priorities coming up. We would like to see the development of a citywide performance program. Of course, keep up compliance with legal requirements, update all personnel policies to ensure compliance with legal requirements, support the council's vision and values, conduct a compensation and class study, streamline onboarding of new hires, ensure staff retention, regular training for all staff, conduct our DEI assessment, establishment of the City of Ashland as an employer of choice in the Valley, and functional working space for all of our employees.
Sabrina, if I may, thanks, if I may share.
Yeah.
Sabrina, for those of us who are going from the paper, I know we were at 143, 147 in HR. I don't know what page that is in our hard copy, on our hard copy. HR.
76, I think, 76.
Okay. So if somebody could let us know which page that is, and so we could quickly turn over, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So the HR department is composed of the HR director, as well as a human resource analyst, and hopefully a risk management analyst. The HR director also oversees our courts personnel, but right now we're strictly speaking HR personnel. Significant changes coming up for HR: addition of a risk analyst, inclusion of funding for a compensation and class study, inclusion of DEI training funds, inclusion of employee appreciation funds. There is a transition of health benefit payments for retirees from the dissolved healthcare fund to the HR budget that we are required to continue. And with the dissolution of that fund, HR makes the most sense. So you will see an increase due to that. And then the health benefits fund was reduced out of the HR budget overall. So with that, you'll see a significant reduction. And this is our proposed budget.
this is where the equity position would also go to?
We're not proposing an equity position.
I thought the city manager's plan proposed a equity, inclusion, and diversity position.
So right now, his proposal was to do a DEI assessment, which we hope to kick off in September. So that will be the first step to assessing the organization and our DEI needs.
And then there's also training money included in the budget for DEI, or a general training money that would include DEI.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Where do the health benefits show up in the budget?
They're in personnel,
Personnel in each department?
correct?
And do we have a figure on the health benefits cost citywide compared in this budget compared with the current budget?
I don't know exactly where to refer you for that, so we'll have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. It's a question, one of the questions that I posed, that I sent to you on Sunday night.
Tanya?
Thank you. Sabrina, a quick question about the healthcare coverage. I know in the past the way we've budgeted it has been so that there wouldn't be an incentive to hire just single people who don't have families, spouses, that sort of thing. Can you just speak briefly to how we're handling the insurance now? Whether, I'm still not clear on the shifts and to what extent we are still sort of protecting that goal around not disincentivizing the hiring of people who have families.
Sure. So, one, we would never ask if anyone has a family during the hiring process, so we would not be privy to that information. Two, the health benefit fund was a holdover from when we were self-insured, and so the dissolution of that fund is kind of where you see that money coming out of HR. My understanding, the way we budget is more on an average. So if we know that the person has a family moving forward, we might budget for that one person to have full, but when we create a position, we do it with a combined average of employee to family, and then reconcile that as we move along.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Hi, Molly. Thanks for coming. I would be remiss if I didn't pose Shane's last question to your department. How do you feel you are in capacity and goals for the next biennium?
Get in there.
I'm hoping that we will, with the hiring of the two positions, be on the right track. I think with addition to the FTEs that we're proposing, I think we need a bigger HR department. So increasing it from 2 to 3, I think will be a huge help.
Great, thanks.
What's the ideal staffing level for HR?
It's always been 2, so, and it's been a struggle. So I think these next 2 years will be a good test to see if we're in the right place.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Molly, quick question. If you're moving on to risk separately, I'll hold this one.
Nope.
Nope, okay. With regard to the risk management position, is that where we will see the information related to the insurance fund coming up and under? And by extension, I know that we have been working to improve our training so that we can better address some of the insurance claims that we were seeing. From the numbers, it looks like we're trending in the right direction. Was hoping you'd be able to confirm that assumption.
Yeah, as far as the
So we so as far as the budget part, we transitioned from being self-insured for workman's comp to being insured for workman's comp, which has been a great help. And then the risk analyst, our hope is to, there is no one to provide citywide training on things like sexual harassment and just things that you want people to be trained on every year. And so that is something that this risk analyst will take on. As everyone may or may not know, how much we are charged for insurance is based on a 3-year average. And so we continue to be punished for a while if we continue to have high claims. And so our hope is to, on the safety side, ensure we're not having the dings and backing into poles, but then also reduce any sort of lawsuits we may have.
Thank you.
That was the position I was referring to.
Oh, the risk one?
Yeah.
All right. Municipal courts. Ashland Municipal Court provides Ashland with a unique opportunity to have cases heard by a local judge elected by our citizens.
Page 98.
Yeah. It provides a local forum for the resolution of traffic violations, violations of the municipal code, and various misdemeanor crimes when they occur within our city limits. So the court is hoping to focus on their high level of customer service, expand walk-in hours, ensure compliance with legal requirements, regular training, staff retention, streamline, that was a holdover from HR, sorry. Technology upgrades, reducing paper usage and productivity, and then support the council. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about courts. So there is an elected judge, elected by the people, as well as a lead clerk, one clerk, and a bailiff who is only working during certain trials. The significant change for courts, we had an increase in their contract funds for court-appointed attorney needs and the reduction of a 0.5 FTE from their budget. And this is their proposed budget.
Yeah, Dave?
The income figures for the municipal court?
They would be in revenue, in the revenue section. I don't know what page that is, because I work off the digital.
36.
So page 27, we have some revenue there. Are you looking for anything in particular?
Or just whatever the general revenue is? Court revenue.
Fines and forfeitures.
Any other questions?
What's the figure?
350,000.
Is that from the courts?
I think so.
So about 349,000. Specific to court, which would include traffic fines, district court fines, misdemeanor fines, and downtown parking surcharges. Oop, that does not include that, sorry.
That's the total, all of that is in the court.
Correct.
Thank you.
Is that down so much because of COVID, or, I mean, it was over $1 million the last biennium, and now it's like 350?
Yeah, so we've had a reduction in parking fines, so we haven't had our traffic cop out for a while due to COVID and staffing levels. So traffic fines are down. We also find that the court tends to issue community service over fines. So we have adjusted the revenue based on actuals over the last 3 years than what we would hope to see.
Who sets that policy? Just the court, the judge?
All right.
All right. You can stay if you want. So the last one is the city recorder's office. So the city recorder is an elected official. They keep official records and documentation of official acts of the city, serve as the city's elections officer, produce minutes and agendas. They're the archivist, assist commission and committees, facilitates the city's portion of the liquor license applications and renewals, and is the public records custodian. The priority for the recorder's office is to...
Sorry, 1 second. I think Joe's trying to get the page.
Oh, just a second, I'm done blended. Oh, city recorder's on page 80.
Thank you.
Page 80. The recorder's office is hoping to complete a backlog of scanning of all documents, expand walk-in hours for customer service, ensure compliance with legal requirements, keep up to date on regular training, update our Laserfish software, which is where we keep our official records, update the liquor license process, update all commissioning committees on the website, and implement a new agenda management software. The city recorder's office is the city recorder and a part-time administrative assistant. The significant change is adding the 0.5 FTE in support of the backlog and recorder duties we are proposing, and this is their proposed budget.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sabrina, are we looking at ways for automation or duplicate processes? Say if contracting scans something in, that will just stand as the scan, that we don't have to scan twice? Are we looking for those types of things for the recorder's office?
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of procurement, our hope is to make that a digital process moving forward in the next biennium. So that will help with ensuring our records are kind of one touch.
Very good, thank you.
Did you have a question, Chief?
No.
Okay. All right.
I just see my face, I know.
It was your eyebrows. Okay, well, I think we did all that, but any other questions?
Everyone?
Yeah.
So with the recorder resigning, what's the process moving forward?
So that process is outlined in the charter, and I believe once her resignation date comes about, City Council has 90 days to appoint someone, and then that person will serve until the next election.
So that won't change anything that is in the city recorder budget?
No, so City Council will be able to appoint an interim, and we are preparing for that change.
Yep. The process is, the actual termination date is the end of August. The council has 60 days in order to appoint a permanent replacement. So during any, but there's also a sabbatical period there. During the sabbatical period, as well as the 60 days, we will have to have the council appoint an acting or an interim, and then they will make, in that last 60 days, the actual permanent appointment.
And I think I heard you say, so the term would be 4 years out, but they have to run in the next general election?
Yeah, they're elected by the people, so as long as the charter stays as is, they'll continue to be an elected position.
But I mean, they'll have to be elected for 2 years.
Yes, the appointment will be for the period until the next general election, and then the election will be for a 2-year period, in which case then they'll get back on the 4-year cycle.
Thank you.
And then, since we're talking about all these administrative services, the issue of City Hall, I think begs a question. Is there any intention of the city to go back for another bond for City Hall? I mean, the problem continues that we have a degrading building, doesn't meet seismic code. What is the intention there?
In this budget, the intention is that the city council will need to give us staff's direction on how they'd like to proceed. We are targeting deferred maintenance as an item that needs additional resources, depending upon what happens going before the final deliberations of this body, as well as the city council. Will determine whether or not there are additional resources that can go to deferred maintenance. From that, we will basically have a program of trying to just take care of the systems as we can. But I think at this point, we don't have a long-term funding plan or approach for City Hall or cost estimates at this. The historic estimates will probably need to be updated and more work needs to be done. So that's some work that has to be done over the next biennium.
Thank you.
This is the new one? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Finance is on page 72, everyone.
Thanks, Bryn.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Ann Berry. I am the new finance director for the city. And of course, this is Bryn. You're familiar with her, Bryn Morrison. I'm so glad she's here because this is day 6 for me. And so, but I will be presenting the finance department and our budget, and then any questions you might have, I'll try to answer, but Bryn's here to answer those questions. So, our department is responsible for overseeing the fiscal health of the city. So that means that we produce financial reporting. We also assist with policy analyses and recommendations to help city council, standing committees, and other city departments to make decisions and how to best allocate the city resources. I will also add in there, we ensure internal controls and then, ensure compliance to regulatory bodies. Our department is organized in 3 divisions. We've got the finance administration, and then we have accounting, which includes AP and payroll, and also audit, and then customer service, which is utility billing. Need my glasses for this. So our priorities are to implement additional modules in the ERP system, and that would be Munis. Improve transparency through OpenGov, which you are starting to really utilize here in this budget. Support self-payment options for utility billing customers, timely and accurate payments, conclude a successful audit, and monitor and craft the budget. So as I mentioned before, we've got within our 3 groups a total of 16 staff. So between Bryn and I and Cindy Hanks, we've got the department for AR, AP, AR being utility billing, and AP payroll and audit. Some significant changes within the department is an increase in bank charges for citywide credit card processing, and that's due to an increased volume. in credit card payments. Then there's also an increase in licensing cost, and that's due to additional modules that we're adding into the ERP. And this is our proposed budget, a total of 9.2 million. I'll let you land on that for a little bit. And then any questions?
Andy?
Yeah. So you talked about increase in your credit card payment processes, is that correct? Is there a plan to negotiate with your credit card processor or find a new one potentially with better
Right,
rates?
so it's not about the rates as much as it is about the volume. So we've been receiving a lot more credit card payments since the pandemic, so less checks and more online payments.
Okay.
Yep.
With increase in volume though, is there a way to negotiate an even lower rate?
There's always room, but go ahead, do you want to?
Sir. So we are charged by Visa and MasterCard a standard rate that every agency is. Because we offer utility billing as part of our payment process, we have a reduced rate because we don't pass along those convenience fees to our customers. So we actually do have a very low rate, 1.4 as compared to like 3% usually.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And 3% is pretty standard, so 1.4 is good.
Paula?
Mary Ann, are you going to do utility billing separate, or should I ask that question here?
That would be good.
Okay, great. My question around utility billing expense is, when you look at the biennial view, it is down from the 17-19 biennium by about 272,000, and it continues to go down from the last biennium by about 80. And if you look at M&S, you drill down in, you can see that that part's going up for contractual services. So understanding personnel expense trending down, contractual services coming up. I'm just curious what the strategy is right now within utility billing, if we're taking better advantage of automation, outsourcing. What's our driver? Because I feel like we're seeing some increased efficiency there, and I would just like to understand it based on the numbers in the budget.
Absolutely. So in the 21-23 budget, per council directive, we looked into outsourcing some of our processes. And those funds were budgeted in finance administration, not in utility billing. We've transitioned it to be more appropriate because we outsource business licenses, food and beverage, and the transient lodging administration and collection. So those funds are actually budgeted in utility billing now, as well as increased with processing for ease for customers. We have an interactive voice response system where folks can call in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and pay their bill over the phone where they don't need to speak to somebody. And then our enhancements to our website and those sorts of things that we're really trying to help folks be able to help themselves a little bit more, and we're really advancing towards that. One of the things with the pandemic is, folks really have gotten really good at, going on our website, making payments themselves online, making payments over the phone using the IVR system.
It's great to see, and thank you for the follow-up on the council-directed items as well. Much
Absolutely.
appreciated.
And just 1 second, please. We really appreciate the customers that have been willing to do that, because I know it's very difficult for folks when they're used to doing things one way for 20 years, and now we've had this change. So we really appreciate all the patience.
Sorry, I want to go back to the credit card processing fee again, because I forgot to ask, what does the city of Ashland charge?
We don't.
You don't charge? Is that something to consider in the future?
No, that's what, sorry, I didn't explain it well enough. We will not receive that discounted rate if we pass along the fee to the customers. So that's why we do not charge it. It would cost us more to pass along the rate.
Okay, so we choose that instead of saying taking the 3% rate and then charging the customer 3%?
It would actually go higher than 3% for
Okay.
our non-utility. We have 12 different merchant accounts in the city.
Okay.
For example, community development has their own merchant account, Public Works has their own merchant account, and across the city, we get a reduction because utility billing does not pass along the fees.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, thanks. Going back to the utility billing, do you have a sense, do you have a picture, a snapshot of the current overdue accounts at this point? I'm looking in here and I see a bad debt expense of $52,000 projected for the biennium, and I'm wondering how that relates to what our actual overdue accounts are right now.
Sure, sure. So that bad debt expense in utility billing division is not for utilities. It's for business licensing, food and beverage, and the transient lodging. If there's bad debt expense, it actually goes into the utility funds. You'd see that in water, wastewater, electric, that sort of thing. Right now, we have about $1.6 million that we are starting the process on delinquent processing. I have every faith that that will drop quickly based upon our outreach and our communication with customers, our payment plan offerings, and the assistance programs that are offered.
Just as a quick follow-up, what line item, where would we look for the line item on our assistance programs in the online budget?
Sure, so those actually are within the enterprise funds as well.
Okay.
They do not come out of the utility billing budget. They come out of the electric budget for the electric portion, the sewer budget for the sewer portion, and so on.
Perfect.
So you
Thank
would
you, Brenda.
see, yes, you would see those line items within their budgets. And one of the line items is called ALEAP, which is the Ashland Low Income Energy Assistance Program. And one of the line items is the senior discount, which is the year-round discount program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. So regarding the utilities, and I wanted to just have a little bit of clarity around this, is before when we talked about the franchise fees, it is my understanding, and City Manager Lazard explained this very well, that the utilities pay the franchise fees. And when the city raises the cost on the franchise, on the utilities, then that rolls over to the consumer onto our utility bills. Is that correct?
It is not specified on the utility bill, but it's a part of the total package. When our utilities, our enterprise funds, when we do our cost of service studies for our total package, yes, it is included in that total outlook.
Exactly, it rolls over onto the consumer. Thank you.
Any other questions about the benefits administration?
Yeah, just a quick clarification on that. We don't require, say, Spectrum or Hunter to pass that on to the consumer, right? That is their own policy?
We have telecommunication franchise agreements with those folks to where they're required to pay us.
Right,
But
but
I don't
I
think
guess
we-
what I'm saying is that the companies, when they charge that franchise fee to their customers, not us, we're not requiring them to do that. The private corporation is deciding to charge.
You know, I'm not the legal expert in the room on that, so I would defer that to someone else who might know, or we could look into it and get back to you on
And
that.
if
Great,
I
thank
may,
you.
the clarification around that is just that it's common knowledge, if someone is renting a house and the taxes go up on the house, the landlord most likely will raise their rent because they are responsible for that cost. And so, no, I don't believe, I'm not a legal expert either, but I do believe that in many cases, that's what happens. And the reason why I bring that up is that so many times people question their utility bills. And reading certain items or certain things that have been written up, well, no, this won't happen, but this will happen. And then the utility bills go up. So I just want to be very clear for our constituents, not saying that the city says, okay, you've got to do this. However, I do believe it does happen, and I wanted to have some clarity around that so that our constituents can better understand and have a sense of understanding. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Shane. Actually looking at the franchise fees piece here right now, and I think it's important to remember that franchise fees are in fact part of providing a service to those who opt to that service, understanding electric and water is not really an option. But it's also important to remember that the taxpayer would have to pay for any upkeep if we didn't use franchise? Is that true? So somebody would have to pay for the upkeep of the right-of-way. If it isn't the franchise fee payment, then it would probably come back onto the property taxpayer. I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding the paradigm.
There's no escaping the cost.
Okay.
You're either going to pay it now, or you're going to pay it in the future.
Well, you're going
And-
to pay it as someone who partakes of a service. So if
That's
I
right.
don't opt for Spectrum, I'm not paying because I don't have cable. But, I mean, again, electric and water, they're necessities. They're not optional. But if I'm a taxpayer and if it's seated there for upkeep, then I'm paying regardless.
Yep.
Okay.
The community has to understand how to address these costs regardless. If we can pass it on to the correct users who are actually creating the cost, that's the more appropriate way to do it. In terms of the question of whether or not they, or for that matter, if we can pass on the cost, we, and as well as the private sector, are always constrained by the competitive issues. Having dealt with this in the private sector, you may have costs, but you may not be able to pass it on. You are in a competitive marketplace, and the competitive marketplace may set the price that you can afford in order to retain your customers. So you may have to absorb those costs until such time as you can find a way to recoup them. The city does the same thing. We do rate studies, and if we do not adjust our rates, then we have to find another way of paying for them. And then in this case, giving your example, the property taxpayers might have to pay it versus the electric utility ratepayers. So it's just sort of the economic reality. We have to figure out how to pay for these costs, and we are trying to make sure that we are constrained appropriately by affordability, and that we are also constrained by that we don't push those costs farther into the future, because they tend to escalate in terms of how much we have to pay. They compound over time. So we're always mindful about how to stay within an affordability constraint, as just like the private sector does. The city has the same kind of constraints that we try to deal with.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, Jeff.
I'm going to take a stab at this too, if you don't mind, so I understand it. So when a utility has a franchise fee explicitly listed as a line item on their invoice, and that goes up or down based on whatever reason, that is immediately and directly passed on to the consumer, correct? So if the franchise fee was 7% and it went to 8%, that would immediately kick in from a utility that outlines their franchise fee external from their rates. Okay. The city of Ashland, they'll just take the electric department, does not line item their franchise fee on a ratepayer's bill, correct? Right. The franchise fee is built into the, whatever the percentage is, and that's just collected and actually it's just paid to the city of Ashland from the electric department, correct? Okay. If the franchise fee, if the city of Ashland were to increase the franchise fees, let's say, it's the red button. Sorry. It's all right. If the city of Ashland were to increase the franchise fees, that would be an increased cost to the city of Ashland electric department, correct? Correct. But that doesn't roll over to the ratepayer directly and immediately until there is a cost analysis done, okay? And then we decide completely separately as a council decision whether we want to increase or decrease or remain the rates the same. So if franchise fees go up, that's a discussion. If it is not a line item, like it is not on the electric department of water, then the electric or the water department has to have a discussion internally as to what the cost structure is. Then they have to come to council and ask for a potential rate increase, and that will be decided separately by council from the franchise fees.
Correct.
So it is quite possible that the rates could remain exactly the same, even though the franchise fees went up, if council decides so. Thank you.
Correct.
That's part of a larger discussion, but I'm just saying they're not directly correlated.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I recall in the last budget, the biennium 21-23 budget, that there was actually an adjustment to franchise fees that was proposed, and I'm just curious about, I remember there's a reduction in the franchise fee for the electric department, and it was an increase in franchise fees for a couple of others to make them more uniform. Did that happen?
It did not. So that was proposed as part of the budget. The budget was built that way, pending it coming back to council as a resolution for approval to change the franchise fees. Through, a difficult time in our city staffing with losing many people, that actually did not come back to council to change. So we have stayed status quo. That's why you'll see in the budget, and this is one of the questions that we have from the committee on why did franchise fees change, is that we budgeted lower this current biennium we're in for those lower rates, but we did not lower the actual, or change, I shouldn't say lower, but change the actual rate. We lowered the revenue projection coming in, but actually revenue came in higher because we did not lower the rates.
Right. And that's principally the electric fund where the rate was lower.
Electric, water, and sewer.
All dropped a bit?
Paula?
Thank you. I think this one goes more to Joe, so, and in combination with Mary Ann and Bryn. So based on what Bob and Bryn were just discussing, could it come back to council for a policy decision to revisit that and make sure that those are aligned properly based on the original plan? Or are the current revenues baked in such a way that to do so would adversely impact the proposed budget?
Well, yes, it will impact your budget. If you are going to change the rates and we thereby have to lower the revenue amounts, then we would have to find another way of funding a portion of the budget or cut the budget in order to accommodate that reduction in revenue.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah?
I guess the question, just following up on that, Joe, unless the adjustment were revenue neutral, because there was a proposal for increasing some and reducing the others, and I gather the way it was reduced, the way it was actually proposed last time was not revenue neutral, which I gather from the result, but it could be adjusted in a way that's revenue neutral.
Yes, you would, if you were lowering some, you would increase others. You could rebalance those percentages to generate the same amount of revenue and thereby hold the actual budget equivalent to what it is now. But you're right, yes, there could be a policy decision to adjust the rates, but not affect, as you said, a revenue neutral solution.
Okay.
Adjust the franchise fees. We're not talking rates. You said rates and okay.
The franchise fees.
A different question, because I'm looking at the elite budget and the senior discount, and it looks like it's about 230,000 for elite and almost 110 for senior discount. Do I have those right? And so if we wanted to, I guess what's my question? My question is, how were those estimated in order to calculate our costs for the coming biennium? Because we have had some conversations in the council, haven't had a council decision, of course, to extend the period and also make it more available. So I'm wondering if we need to take a look at these lines in order to make space for that sort of policy decision, if we were to take that policy decision.
Absolutely. If you were to make that decision, we would need to look at these line items. Through the current process, it's a set of time, and therefore we don't stop if our expense reaches that mark. So it's a set of time from December 1st for a leap through, it's either 3 or 6 months, depending on how they qualify, up to $300 per household. So we do not stop the process and stop providing assistance if we reach the budget figure. The electric fund, the water fund, the wastewater fund would just absorb the overage.
Right. Yeah. No,
So it would be a discussion on, we would need to increase that expenditure if we were to broaden the time period, for example, for the elite discount.
Okay, and finance department, even though this is in the budget of the electric fund, the finance department is the one that administers it.
Correct, correct, the utility billing division.
Okay.
And what is the capital outlay for this?
So that's the software modules.
Okay.
That's the increase to the software modules. For example, timesheet, online timesheets is a big production. Would be a time saver for staff and trying to be more efficient with getting out of the paper timesheets. Through COVID, we actually advanced with, going towards a Excel file where folks would enter in their time, but it's still a manual process where clerks are then taking that and putting it into a system. So it's one step forward with that. But it's advances with that. It's advances with our purchasing that was spoken about earlier as well.
Okay.
All right.
Before we move on, we had one other question that City Manager Joe Lazard wanted to address, and we have a few slides to act as support, so.
I just really quickly wanted to go back and revisit the question about the perception that there was an error in the documents, or that there was a question about that maybe there was a deficit built in somehow in the budget, and I believe it came from this page. If you go to the city's website and we're looking at the summary for sources and uses, you would come up with these two blocks of numbers, and there is in fact a difference between the general fund revenues and the general fund expenses by type of $6.7 million, and I think that's where that number came from. And I'm sorry. I don't believe it's in a page. I'm just referring to what's on the website. The website shows this number.
It's actually in the online budget under budget summary.
There's also page 16 towards the very.
Page 16.
On the paper budget, pages 15 and 16.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it is. I'm sorry.
All good.
I was looking at it online, so thank you for that clarification. But if you look at the first two blocks of numbers on page 16, you'll see the same items that are on your PowerPoint right here. And it does show a $8.4 million approximately of revenues, and then it shows general fund expenses by types. And if you do the math, you'll see that there's a $6.7 million difference. And the reason for that is that the revenues are the proposed actual new revenues coming into the city versus funds that we would be rolling over from the ending balance of this year. And that's how that 6.7 is covered or paid for, so that we actually have a balanced budget. So I just want to be clear, since we had that conversation, particularly for folks who might be watching and listening, that we do have a balanced budget. We do not have a deficit, that these funds are actually covered by funds that are at end-of-year funds that are rollovers into the new year, or the beginning balance funds that are available into the next year. Now, there are some items that those funds need to go for. We do have an ending fund balance policy. And that was the 20% number that I was talking about in my presentation when I introduced the budget. We're required by city policy now, and this is at the city council's discretion to set financial policies, that we set aside a 20% number of our expenditures. And we're recommending that we go to the General Finance Officers Association standard or best practices number of instead of 20% to a 16.67%. What that number is actually that's our working capital. So we always retain a working capital, so that as revenues and expenditures fluctuate through the year against each other, that we always have enough working capital to make sure that we can cover our any checks that we issue. So that's why we have to have this policy. That's why those funds are held. We also in the budget have a contingency numbers that are kept for all of our funds, and we also have an emergency reserve. So those are all the items that we build into our budget to make sure that we are safe financially, that we are secure in terms of our projections, that we can live within our budget. We have ways of making sure that cash fluctuations are taken care of. unexpected events are taken care of, catastrophic events are taken care of. Those are all the things we build in to protect the city and the citizens of Ashland against unforeseen circumstances. So what happens is when the funds are rolled over, those are additional sources. They're not revenues, they're additional sources that are also used to balance the budget. The items that I just talked about that we deduct from that rollover, the contingency amounts, the ending fund balance and so forth, those are deducted. And the 6.7 is covered by the excess funds we have from the rollover that go toward covering those expenses. So the budget is balanced. We do not have a structural deficit. We are well within safety margins in terms of our policies, and we believe the city is in a strong financial condition. So I don't want to beat that to death, but I just thought it would be really important that the community understand what we do to protect them and the organization so that we can provide the services that they are expecting from the city.
Dave?
What's the difference between rollover funds and an ending fund balance? Do you actually keep that in a certain department? You keep the rollover funds in a certain department?
No, that's a great question. The funds that have to be by policy established as our ending fund balance is unappropriated. It's not available in any fund to spend other than the city sits on it, and that's our cash reserve.
Right.
We are actually expending against our budget. That's our cushion, just as things fluctuate. But it's not appropriated money. We don't spend that money, and then at the end of the year go, oops, we spent that. And no, you set the appropriations by each fund. We live within those appropriations. And this is just a cash balance that is unappropriated that adjusts as we issue actual checks.
But run it by me one more time. You using rollover funds.
Okay, all right.
Now, would those rollover funds normally increase the ending fund balance?
Well, those items are the beginning balance of the new budget. Out of that beginning balance, I guess what I was saying is rollover, that they're rolled over to the near to be the starting point of when we develop our budget. Out of that money, we know that we have to keep that reserve, we have to have a calculated 20% or 6.67% reserve, in essence, operating cash that is not going to be spent. It just gives us a flexibility to issue checks against whatever revenues are in place at the moment that we have to issue that check. So that's our operating cash. That, at the end of the budget, so at the start of the budget process, we know what is the ending fund balance and what comes over from the prior year. And we know at the bottom of that budget, we still have to have an ending fund balance that's calculated and held unappropriated for our cash reserves. We also have to have our contingency, and we also have an emergency reserve. So those three items are subtracted basically from that beginning balance, and then we go, okay, now here are the real sources, the new revenues plus the sources from the prior year that are actually available to be appropriated for expenditure. And that's where your ballot budget comes into play. We have to have, with those sources, those new revenues and those existing sources, we have to have a balanced budget. So what you have before you is a balanced budget, making sure that we've met the ending fund balance requirement, the contingency requirements, those are all, and the emergency reserve are still there.
Thank you.
The one critique that I would offer is that it is based somewhat on a reduction in the ending fund balances. So whether or not we can sustain this budget over the long term without additional revenue, because that's a one-time hit that we've reduced our ending fund balances and spent that revenue. But as we move into the next biennium, we won't be able to do that once again. We can't drop our ending fund balances and spend that revenue.
Well, but you have, by reducing that percentage would roll forward, and every year you'd have 16.67% versus 20%. So it is actually ongoing funding source available to the general fund. It's because we don't have to have, we've captured more money than we need and we're unappropriating it. So it does actually allow us to go forward in terms of an ongoing revenue source.
I might also add that by definition, working capital carryover is a budget source. It's a resource. It's that monies has already been appropriated from the previous biennium, right? But because, for whatever reasons, there were personnel vacancies or it just didn't get spent, it's carried forward.
I understand that fully. What I'm talking about is the difference between the previous ending fund balance that we've now reduced to 6.72, which is the,
For the general.
or 16 from 20. That 4% we're spending, it would seem like, by the next biennium, we're not going to be able to reduce that back down. We're not going to reduce below 16 now.
No, you're right. This is a one-time adjustment, but it does roll forward in terms of every year. We're budgeting only at 16.67 versus the 20%. So that gap in terms of what we would have appropriated, or I guess
That's what I'm talking
what we
about.
would have kept in the ending fund balance is, it's an adjustment that does go forward in time.
Hold on.
Okay, I think part of the question here is whether it is a balanced budget and the difference between that and a sustainable budget. And what people are talking about is whether it's a sustainable budget, and by that meaning that the revenues coming in cover the expenditures going out, and that you're not going to have a rollover of 6.7 million every 2 years, hopefully. My concern is if you have that, the only way you have that is by not spending money that you've budgeted. So to address that it's a balanced budget and everybody should be happy with that, that's great. But to alleviate people's worries about it being sustainable ongoing, I think is something else.
Okay, let me try to address that. Is it sustainable? Yes, we believe it is, because that 6.7 that we're appropriating were funds that were budgeted and were unspent. And so if we continue the basic program that we've had going forward, budgeting as we have in the past, we're not talking about an incredibly dramatically different budget going forward. We think our 3.5% adjustments plus the way that the city has budgeted long-term is sustainable going forward. We're not suggesting that we have one-time money and we spend it all and then we're going to end up short the next biennial budget. What we're trying to do is align ongoing revenues with ongoing expenses, making sure that those accounts that need to be held in reserve to protect the city are still in play.
Thank you, Shane. It kind of piggybacks on this conversation that we're having. The unspent revenue, when I looked at this, is that the FTEs that were budgeted for that we never got, the vacancies?
To a certain degree, yes. Yes, but we budgeted for those positions, we didn't fill them, and we're going back to the pre-pandemic level of staffing and appropriations. The issue that we're really talking about is what happens if we have another economic upheaval, such as the pandemic represented to this community. And the fact that we also have, there are a number of issues. We had supply chain issues. We had COVID-19. We had the inability to find staff. We had a number of issues that hit the city. Every city is going to face those issues as they come up over time. What we are looking at right now is returning to a post-pandemic level of service delivery and staff workload, given what we believe our finances are. Now, that does not mean, and if you look at my budget message, one of the messages I included, one of the risks we face is economic upheaval. We will always face that, and when it comes, we will have to adjust our expenditures in order to match what our actual revenues are going forward. So we will be monitoring the expenditures through the year, particularly by the middle of the biennium. We're going to have to look at and say, okay, what's actually happening with our staffing levels? What are we actually spending? Do we have vacancy savings? If you recall, vacancy savings is one of the things that helped us last term. Our economic numbers from the economy bounced back, our TLT and our food and beverage tax bounced back. We are going to have to, from here on out, we have to be very careful because the economic climate is changing in the world. And we are going to have to understand what's happening at the Fed, what the Fed's doing with battling inflation, and the potential that what they're doing might create other issues going forward in the economy. We're going to have to pay attention to what's going on in our cost structures, particularly in our capital side, because if we have capital expenditures and we've locked in our available resources for that, we're going to have to adjust those programs. Our rate structures, we're going to have to watch all these items. It's sort of a whole new world, and if you pay attention to what's happening to us locally, we are much more vulnerable to economic upheaval or disruptions nationally than a lot of other economies are. So we have to be very careful. We're a tourist economy. We depend upon tourism, and we depend upon and have historically depended upon the in-person education experience at the university to bring new cash into this community. And so anything that disrupts their workload, their cash flow, affects us. So we have a lot of variables we have to start watching that we have never had to watch before. And so and that's just the reality of Ashland and quite a bit of the world now. So the monthly financial or quarterly financial reports, the council has started saying, I want to see this publicly discussed. We're going to have to be telling you exactly, here's what's happening and what we think is coming. And if we have to make adjustments, under this form of government, I will be forced to restrain expenditures in order to stay within revenues and sources.
So just so that it's very clear, so those vacancies, the full-time employees that have been budgeted for, that have not been filled, that money goes to the bottom line, and then it's rolled over.
Yes. In the past, was rolled over, a portion of it was rolled over into the reserve, the 20% balance, and we're suggesting that that's a segmentation of your funding sources, your revenues that you need to unchain.
If I may also add, it may not only be personnel, it could be timing issues, it could be a number of different issues. As it's been said before, this budget is our best guess, right? And so the timing of our expenditures may not always happen within the biennium. So whatever that ending balance is, the ending fund balance will be what it is. And then we decide here, you decide what the budget from that ending fund balance, what the working capital carryover would be, and the reappropriation of that ending fund balance.
That's a good point. When we don't have staff, it isn't just personnel expenditures that drop off. They're not there to do the work. Other things drop off. So it's a little bit of an amalgam of different things that get delayed or postponed that we're dependent upon ongoing revenue sources that we now come back and say, okay, we need to pick those items back up.
I appreciate Mr. Lazard's comments. My only concern is I think there are some things that are happening now that we should do, that this budget committee has to consider. One business person told me this week that 2023 looks like 2020, but without masks. That the economy is that bad of shape. And I know people in my former profession say August is totally dead in terms of bookings. So I think we have to, instead of delaying until something actually happens, I think we should be careful in this budget to be conservative, so that we don't start spending a lot of money, and then I have to cut back all of a sudden. I think there's just there are ways in which we just need to be very conservative here. And on the, I had a couple of questions I submitted with regard to the ending fund balance in the general fund. How long has this been recommended by this group to lower it from 20 to 1667, to lower that? How long has that been their proposal?
It's just this biennium.
But, I mean, I thought when...
How long has it been GFOA's recommendation?
Yeah, how long has it been there?
A very long time.
A very long time.
A very long time.
Mm-hmm. But for years, all budget directors have put it in at 20, because that's...
No.
No, that's not true. It actually was at 12% at one time, and I think about, 2 or 3 bienniums ago, they raised it to 20, and our sense is that we've now exceeded what is sort of the best practices. And that, of course, we don't want to go back to 12, but instead of going to 20, our recommendation is that you go to the standard 16.67%.
So the 20% was when, was it when was that instituted?
It was in the 1921, so 1921 and 21-23.
And whose recommendation was that?
I'm not sure, honestly. I don't know if we've had 3 different finance directors since
Right.
then, so.
Well, I thought it had gone back to Lee Toomberg's time, but you're saying it's
During Lee Thunberg's time, it was the 12%.
the 12. Thank you. My mistake.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Man, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell us what's around the corner with our next economic state. You ask 20 business people the state of the economy, you're going to get 20 different answers. My business is up 15%, and I'm thrilled. But that's, lucky us right now. We've, endured lots of hardships and hit the rocks twice and crashed hard and bounced back. So I appreciate avoiding those kinds of struggles, but I also don't know how to bring the crystal ball into the conversation other than to just look at our sustainability and evaluate, to run our own race, as we say. And I have a question here. My question is, of the 6.7 million rollover, I believe it's this body that proposes how much of that is actually rolled over and where, and if not, where we're spending it, recommended to council, and then council approves it, correct?
The 16.67 is not appropriated and not spent. It stays in our accounts, in the budget documents. It's not an expenditure. Everything, other portions are, the contingency is appropriated, but it's not spent unless council votes on it.
Well, I'm talking about the 6.7 million.
Oh, the 6.7.
Moving forward with into the next biennium.
6.7 is in your appropriations for the next biennium.
So this body and then the
That's
council.
correct. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your
Right, so
question.
if we had, money that we were trying to spend in this last biennium, but the project didn't go, we could leave it as a carry forward if we wanted to for a particular department.
Yes, you could. Let me also point out that, and maybe we haven't really underscored this, this budget also, getting back to the question of the economy, is trying to invest in our economy. There are a number of items in this budget that are trying to refresh the downtown. Some of our workload has to do with trying to establish a new activity center around the university. We are looking at a number of items in this budget, and perhaps maybe that's a slide we can come back with in a future discussion so you can sort of see, because we understand that we're only as successful as our economy is successful. And taking a lead from the council's discussion on the economic roundtable and the work that the chamber did looking at diversification of the economy, we tried to pay attention to those items and say, if you want to do these things, if you want Ashland to really become base camp for outdoor recreational activities, if you want us to broaden our attractiveness and make us more sustainable from an economic standpoint, there are items in this budget that try to do that. While we have revenues, we are suggesting a number of investments to try to build the economy as well. So we're not just passively taking what happens, but we're trying to be proactive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce what Joe's saying and really counter this claim that the economy is doing so badly. I mean, right now, the Fed is raising interest rates because the economy is so hot and it's growing extremely fast. And, if it does push into recession from raised interest rates, they have the tool now to lower those interest rates once again and bring the economy back. So I think we're actually in really good economic shape. What affects economic change lots of times is the spirit of people in communities. And we see this is why banks fail, is because everyone suddenly has a run on the bank and the consciousness of the people drives a collapse. And the same is true with economic growth. And that's why investing in our community really has a return that can be seen in economic growth. So, I'd really encourage us to continue down the path with the budget that's proposed here and investing in our community. And one of the things it's also looking at is a study of additional revenue streams. $40,000 is committed toward looking at new revenue streams to fund some of this deferred maintenance. I mean, we talk about debt, and the debt is out there. Taking it on is actually removing debt, because the debt is real. It's authentic. It's deferred maintenance. It's a dam that could fail. It's a water plant that needs to be replaced. And the more of those things that we can take on and invest in, the better off we'll be in the long run.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, when we were discussing the electric department budget, I asked a question about the conservation programs. And if I remember correctly, the answer was that those had been moved over to administration. But I didn't see those in here. So where do we find that, and where do we have the discussion about the electric conservation funding?
I'm going to have to defer. Yeah, city manager's budget. Thank you.
69.
Is that the $535,000 total on page 69 that you're referring to?
It's the line item budget that carries over into 70.
Right, it's all, just looking at the programs total for the conservation loans, conservation programs, solar program, conservation programs, BPA.
They're all down from the last biennium.
So do we have a follow-up?
Sure.
Do we have a comparison from previous years for these numbers? And I apologize if they're right in front of me.
We don't have it broken down by the division level because this is in the electric fund. So we don't have it broken down by the division level, but I can generate it real quick just to let you know compared to the previous. Just
Thank
one
you.
moment,
That would be
please.
very helpful.
Absolutely.
And are the clean fuels credits program within this budget? Part of the budget? What's that? Did you, okay. Yeah, she's.
No, no worries. Thank you for your help. You're doing great in that. Great job, all of it. You taught me.
So I'll ask my question again. Are the clean fuels credits program within that conservation budget? Okay. Thank you. Got it.
In total, the budget is 2.2 million for this biennium coming up, proposed. It was 2.4 last. Actual for 1921 was 1.6. And as far as clean fuels credits, actually absorbed in a line item, so we'll have to get back to you on that, on the actual amount. I thought it was part of Tom's presentation, that I might be thinking of. And
Probably, yeah.
Tanya, I think, had a follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So, Bryn, thank you. I was having a little bit of trouble hearing. So am I understanding that we're budgeting less than in the previous biennium? Did I hear that number correctly, the 2.4?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's going from 2.4, which is in this biennium, to 2.2.
Thank you.
And can I follow up on that?
Yes.
And
So that 2.2 in this biennium, is that the total of the conservation programs that's funded through BPA, conservation programs of the city, the solar program, and the conservation loans? Is that where you're getting that Because I'm seeing it broken down, I'm not seeing a total number like that.
So that is the personnel costs for the analysts that we have, and the
Oh.
materials and services, and the loan programs, the BPA amount.
Okay, but it's not the incentive programs by themselves.
Correct,
So the
correct. That's
incentive
the
programs-
total budget of that division.
Because when I'm looking at the incentive programs by themselves, the city's incentive programs for conservation are 335,000 versus 550 in the last biennium. Is that what you're seeing as well? Which is a drop of 200,000 budgeted.
I do see that. If there needs to be follow-up, we'll need to talk with Tom about the reason for that, so we can sure get the detail on that reduction for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this? What we just discussed? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just had one other question. When I go through the different departments, I see the UAL, it's blanking yet.
Unfunded
Actuarial liabilities, yes, unfunded actuarial liabilities of PERS.
Yes.
We talk in so many acronyms, I'm trying not to do that in this meeting. Anyway, I see those across the board for each of the departments, and I so appreciate having them now not connected in with, so that they're looking like they're part of our ongoing benefits. But are we going to have a conversation about just what that total looks like? Because it often comes up in conversation about PERS, and people get confused between the existing employees and their PERS benefits and this unfunded actuarial figure, and what impact that figure has on our ongoing budget. So is there going to be an opportunity in this process to just maybe get a slide about what has that looked like over the last number of years as it relates to the city's overall financial position?
Sure, we can do that for you and
we
bring
can
it
do
back.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob?
And on that note of the PERS, that we should have gotten a number from the PERS administrator a few months ago, or maybe at the end of last year, with the new number for this biennium. Did they update that to every 2 years? Did I get that? And I don't remember seeing it, whether it was going up or going down, what they were asking us for.
It usually comes in December.
December.
Yes, so we could gather that and provide
But
it.
that would be the number that you used for the
For
calculations
budgeting,
this time?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Whether it went up or down, I didn't see it this year. I also, going back to this ending fund balance discussion, maybe I shouldn't open it up again, but I'm just noticing that, we talk about ending fund balance as a source. It's also a use, and it's projected. So there's a projection in here that says the total of ending fund balances in all the funds that's going to be used to begin the funds for the next biennium, the 25-27, is actually higher than, the projection is higher than it was this time. It's projecting an ending fund balance at the end of this coming biennium, of $53 million versus $39 million, which was the projection for the end of biennium that we're currently in. So it's a substantial increase of the carrying forward of ending fund balance. So even though we're using some ending fund balance, we're actually increasing the amount that we're projecting carrying forward to the ending fund after this biennium.
So how much is the bonus revenue that we get by dropping the ending fund balance from 20 to 16,000?
Yeah, I think that was in my presentation the other day, and my recollection is it's $800,000.
800,000. And
$800,000.
That's the one-time hit that I'm
That's
talking
the one-time adjustment.
Right, which we can expect probably an increase in meals tax revenue, TOT revenue, general growth to compensate that within 2 years to where we probably can sustain 800,000.
Assuming those other revenues go up, then yes, that will change the balances, and the 16.67% will go up in real dollars, but the other revenue will offset that. So
Right, and then we are also, this biennium, taking on a very large project, the water plant.
That's true.
But the debt service is only a fraction, but still.
Lita, do you have something from before?
I have something that isn't like what we're immediately discussing, but it is got to do with some of the things I've asked for in the past. And it's about OpenGov generally, which City of Ashland started using in 2017. And for several years, the detail, I know I've asked for this a million times, but I've asked for the detail of the personnel per department. And I just wanted to show you that I have a screenshot that we used to get it just on OpenGov. And I've been told it's not available, and it's never been, but it was. And so I'd like you to look at what I have here. And I just would like a return to the transparency we used to have in terms of being able to see this. I believe that it relates to the ending balances, the ending fund balances. I also would like to be able to see what positions are vacant in terms of budgeted items. Do I have enough of there? More. Does everybody have? I know the screenshot's not great, but you can see that we used to be able, this is from 2020, used to be able to get this detail. And people have requested it, I've requested it, I've been told it's not available. A public records request that I made in January, I was told wasn't available, and the staff would take 80 hours of staff time at a cost to me of $4,800. And it seems to me these are public records that should be available to us, to everyone. This is not a secret, and salaries and benefits are not excluded from public records.
That's correct. The information was historically put together. We have not put it together this biennium. That's because it all has to be done by hand. It's not an automatic push a button, calculate, it prints out. All of this information historically was assembled by hand when we had a full operating financial department. We have not had that for quite some time. It is not available. It just simply is not available unless we take the time to divert our financial staff to put this together. And so it isn't available as a simple calculation. Our payroll system does not integrate with OpenGov. It doesn't automatically calculate what's the payroll and then integrate it into the budgeting process. Everything that you see in OpenGov is hand entered based upon spreadsheets that departments put together and forecast and work through based upon their historic records, and then it all gets hand entered, data entered into OpenGov so that we can assemble the document that you have. We can do this work for you if you would like us to have it, but it means that we're going to have to stop doing other things in the budgeting process. To prepare for these meetings takes basically the whole week getting ready for these conversations. And so, I mean, that's the reality of what it takes to do this process. We don't keep a record of all the open positions and what their salaries are and what the benefits are attached to them. We don't keep a record, a easily accessible and OpenGov process. So that's the difficulty we have going forward. And you're right, I don't think that we have any disagreement that it was historically available because we had a fully functioning finance department. We haven't had that. I think you've been working a week now in terms of, so it currently is not available, and it's not a question of open records or not open records. It can be made available if you'd like us to put it together. It's just that we haven't had the resources to do it.
Yeah.
Question, what do we gain by getting the granularity of that information? Personally, from a budgetary standpoint, I'm looking at department budgets, FTEs, inflation, other things going on. I don't care how much Joe or Jane makes personally. I'm looking at a department, their strength, their numbers, their goals. our policy that goes along with spending these dollars and achieving those goals. And I don't personally want to pay for staff time to get into this granularity because it's a micromanaging component that the budget committee, as I understand, doesn't have. So I just want to put that out there.
I thought Linda addressed this at the last meeting and did a good job of it, that this is really outside of the purview of the budget committees, similar to what Eric's saying here as well. And, you know, we go through a bargaining process with our unions, define what their incomes are, and we don't really have any authority over that level of policy making. Ours is a broader viewpoint of the budget and whether or not, you know, we're moving forward in the right direction without inconsistencies within the budget. So I don't really, I thought we already talked about this. Linda responded to it. I thought she did a good job. And I don't really see why this is coming back again.
It's coming back because it's two things. It's a matter of feeling that things are transparent, and it's a matter of being able to see the individual positions, how they relate to the whole, especially because of the vacancies. Because that's how we had so much of our carry forward, to be able to really understand. You know, we're told, you know, occasionally this position is open and then we're hiring these positions, and it's impossible to get a whole view of what that is. You know, how many positions are open, you know, or we're understaffed here, or we're understaffed there, or are all these budgeted positions going to be filled, or are we going to leave some of them open and have a carryover again? So these are, I think, really good things in terms of having transparency for the public to know. And I understand what Joe is saying in terms of not having been staffed. But when it was available through 2020 and then wasn't, it appears that things were just obfuscated all of a sudden. And so that's why the issue has come up. And I think for those reasons in particular, it's a valid one.
If I could add a little bit, what we tried to do in this budget, and if you look at the budget document, you'll see these, is we tried to give you an organization chart to show you what positions are in the budget and not in the budget. We also tried to give you a cost or a cause-effect analysis of what the, I don't have one up in front of me right now, but in terms of what the major workload items are each department. And we don't anticipate intentionally holding positions vacant in the budget. At any given moment, the number of vacancies and filled positions are different. Everything is a snapshot in time because people resign, people retire. We are in the hiring process. This last week, this week I reported to council on what our current staffing is. We have, if I remember, 17 positions that we're working on. I believe there were 13 of them that are in process of being interviewed or selected. There are 2 positions that are currently posted, and if I remember, there are 3 positions that we're just starting the process on. So we're constantly reporting to council, but every week those numbers are different. And so what we're trying to do is to sort of say, in this budget, here's the organizational chart, what's funded, what isn't funded, positions that we anticipate in this budget, and we anticipate within the appropriate amount that we will go forward and fill these positions as quickly as possible in order to make sure that we have the staff to do the work that's on the cause-effect diagrams that we've given you. So I realized that we weren't able to assemble, but since we had already assembled those org charts for the mid-year budget decision, we updated them because that was a lot simpler process for us to show you what the staffing requirements by department are associated with the budget that for department that is presented.
Does anybody have any other questions on that? Yeah, Gina.
So this is off topic, but it is about the budget. So in this conversation that we've been having, twice I've heard the phrase new revenue. So where's the new revenue?
Well, I think the new revenue, I guess, was associated with this idea of doing a study to identify potential new revenue. And there's $40,000 to do that economic analysis or identify under state law or within the city's jurisdictional authority what new revenue might be available or how assets might be used to generate new revenue. The economic aspects that are in the budget are tailored to try to shore up our economic underpinnings as best the city can, act within its resources to make sure that the revenues that are in place and I guess new revenues, and maybe someone can correct me if I'm missing something here, but the other additional new revenues is that we do have a bounce back in the economy in terms of our projected TLT and our food and beverage tax, that those items came back stronger than were anticipated. And that's what I was saying earlier, that we're getting back to sort of pre-pandemic, but we are also going to have to monitor as we go more carefully because of the implications of what the national as well as the local economy have. I don't recall that we've actually created a new revenue source in this budget. The only thing we've done is to try to make sure that those available to us are actually available for you to expend. Again, reducing the ending balance reserve to 16.67, making the additional $800,000 available. The way that we've addressed the food and beverage tax in this budget is by using it for street debt, so that frees up the franchise fees to be available to the general fund. If things change based upon the voters' actions in the next few days, that we may come back to you with an adjustment for that. But we haven't identified any new revenue source. What we're doing is just simply looking at what we think the projected revenues going forward with existing sources are, and then perhaps looking at, okay, is there something that we have left behind, that we've missed, that's fallen off the table, that the city could say, wait, there's something else we could consider as an additional or new revenue source. But I don't think we've really projected any quote-unquote new revenue at this point. We'd love to, but I think we're just trying to live within what we think is reasonable going forward at this point.
Joe, don't you have budget part-time economic development or full-time economic development person in the budget?
No, we do not. In order for us to make sources available in the general fund, we did have a position that we added mid-year last year, and we actually went through the process of advertising and marketing for it. But one of the decisions that I had to make going into this budget was that the best use of those funds, given all the other issues that we have? And instead what we have is we have an approach which was recommended to me by our Public Works Director to look at accelerating or identifying potential grant applications by basically absorbing the cost as we go forward on particular projects, and use the firms that we have contractual relationship who can flag and help us identify other actually would be new revenue sources, rather than actually filling a full-time position that was more expensive than that alternative. So the position is not in the budget. It would have been in the city manager's office, but we eliminated that position because we felt that there were other priorities and we could fill that approach. I'm trying to speak into the mic, or not my ear. We could fill the need for grant support in an alternative way and try to absorb it within our other our capital programs or other operating. So that's not off the table. It's just not a specific position.
So to summarize, we're contracting for grant work. Well, maybe that brings up a great point. I mean, maybe that's something that this body invests in, which is an economic development position, similar to what President Bailey is investing in at SOU. Somebody who can, as somebody recently said in front of council, tend to the fields and really try to draw some new programs, new revenue. And I understand how a contracted position laser focuses on, okay, water treatment plant, grant, ready, go. But perhaps a staff person on city that is really connected, drawing different threads and being proactive about new revenue sources might be something that we want to set policy for.
You can piggyback if
Okay.
your question.
Is it related?
Joe, I remember when you were talking earlier in your overview, you mentioned that we have an analyst position coming into the city manager's office. And I recall you mentioning that some of the work of that analyst would be related to these economic partnerships that we have developed. And so can you speak just generally to this conversation around how do we marshal our resources for economic development planning more so than, the physical things that we'll do with helping our businesses?
That's a very good question, and it pertains to the previous discussion about the position. In the conversations we've had overall in terms of how the city manager's office operates, it's clear that we need someone to help us coordinate. But that's really not an economic development person, at least in my estimation. It's more of a person of, we have so many stakeholders in our community and so many issues that the council is trying to address, that a lot of the work in my office that are areas where, quite frankly, where I fall down on is trying to coordinate all those and make sure that we're actually in sync with or aligning all of those interests. So the position that is in the manager's office is addition. It says analyst, but it's really administrative support to make sure that as an organization we function. When I first came to the city, I had a decision to make about what position came into the office and whether or not that was that coordinative position internally and externally was the most important. And I made a conscious decision not to fill that position. I was going to have to figure out how to deal with that myself. Not wanting to highlight any of my failures over the last 16 months, it's an area that obviously needs more shoring up because I can only juggle so many balls at any given time, and there are too many things to be juggled. So in our office, I see an acceleration of topics that have to be addressed. Everything from childcare to homeless issues to economic tracking to grant application processes. And so the way we have approached this is, right now we have really an urgent need to take care of that coordinative effort. That person will be engaged, and quite frankly is engaged, because I'm stealing some of the resource from the finance department to get this done now. There are just some things that have to function at a higher level, and so this position is to do that. And internally, it's an important position because there's a lot of internal coordination that also has to be done. The economic development position, when we looked overall at, do we put money into our businesses? How do we invest back into the downtown? How do we look at planning and coordinating efforts around the university district? How do we deal with the childcare issues? Those are all, and by and large, probably easily over 50% coordination efforts, getting all the stakeholders to the table to come up with a consensus approach to dealing with the topic. We have 3 partnerships that we're trying to start, and there will be more. So the best choice I could make, I felt, and you're right, this is a direction for the council and this committee to consider. Do we want to add back a specific economic development position? The decision I made and was that, okay, there were other investments that I thought were more important, and we could pick up the grant process by departments who are more familiar with the actual, what they're looking for, and could work with their contractors more directly to make that process work. And so that was the balance that I came to. That's sort of how we ended up with the budgets that is before you today, and is open for ongoing discussion and adjustment as we go forward. I'm not sure I've answered all the real question there, but that's sort of how we've sort of pieced together the approach that's in this budget.
Did that answer?
It did, but
Okay.
I can talk to Councilor Hanson after.
Okay. Andy?
A couple questions. Are the Q1 food and beverage and TOT tax, is that published already? Has that been calculated?
We have done a preliminary estimation on what it is, what might be additionally available if the ballot measures pass, and we can bring that to you at the appropriate time.
Yeah, and I'd be curious how Q1 has compared to previous years, if that's, back to normal levels or even like pre-pandemic levels.
Sure.
And secondly, non-related to that, but a little related, for new revenue, have city considered like a retail tax, like excluding non-tourism retail like grocery? So it'd be complicated, but that's certainly a new revenue opportunity.
The kind of question you're asking now is exactly what we hope to take up in the new revenue study. What authority does the city have? What is actually supports and bolsters the economy versus what might be an additional drag on the economy? What assets can we bring to the table to make the city's programming be funded in a more appropriate way? So that we haven't specifically looked at different revenue sources, but we believe that that's really work that's really beyond the expertise of this current staff, and that we need to get someone who really understands the state law and the appropriate, and to look at what other communities have done that have been successful before we would get into the weeds on that, on a recommendation there.
Are we with more presentations, or are we done with that?
I think we've covered everything we were going to present today.
Well, then I had a question. When we first met, we were told to submit questions 3 days in advance, right? I submitted a bunch of questions in anticipation we get answers to those questions. But some of them have been discussed, but a lot of them, there are a number of them, and one on food and beverage and lodging. The questions went into a void. What's going on? I will continue to ask questions and submit them, and I did, as I did on Sunday night. But is it, if it's not very helpful if you ask a dozen questions, you only get answers in part.
Well, I'm sorry if we didn't get to everything today, but we will respond to all the questions, and I believe that, as a matter of fact, I think our questions are in development. We just didn't have everything ready for you today, but they will be available.
A few of them are, yes, but not all of them. The questions are there, but the answers aren't there. There was a question of what's the total PERS cost, including the city's payment of employee shares, as compared to 21-23, which is the question that was asked again today, right? I spent some time looking through the budget on things which I felt would be discussed tonight, and it's frustrating. I'm happy to comply with the request that we submit questions in advance, but I would like some anticipation those questions are going to be answered.
So David, we absolutely will address all of those questions. Unfortunately, it's just a time constraint right now, but absolutely we will get to all of them.
Well, that's why I went in on Sunday night.
It's a huge lift, though. You have to understand that we have many, many things going on right now, and this is definitely a priority, but please understand, we will do our best to get those to you timely.
Yeah, my understanding was that they would come up potentially with the departments that would be speaking if it's like that, if it's relevant.
These are general questions and not, I'll do departmental questions when the departments come up.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if, as a way to make sure that that questions are not being lost, if when you when staff puts together this packet each week, if you could identify all the questions, and then if there are questions that are a heavier lift than what you could get to that day, we at least have it flagged, and then if we've asked a question, we know it didn't get lost in all of the flurry of working on these answers. But I recognize that what can seem like a very straightforward question may take a lot of background work to answer. And so maybe something like that could help us, and then all of the committee members would know that their question is still in the queue. Is that something that we could do?
That's a great idea. We'll see if we can't keep a log in terms of what's coming and what has come, and make sure that everyone understands where we are in that process.
Thank you. Did you have something?
Well, I was on the previous subject about economic development when I put my hand up. But I was just going to mention that we've also funded in this budget, if we approve it, is the Economic Opportunities Analysis Study, which would be part of the comprehensive plan. So that's going to bring together a breadth of stakeholders to develop. So it will kind of create that focus around economic development that, granted, we don't have a specific staff person focused on it, but the community will be working on that issue.
Great. Anything else? Perfect. Well, next meeting next Thursday this time? Are there any other surprise meetings that are popping up? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.